The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Excellent. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to be covering what's new in Onshape from the month of August, where we had 2 releases for our product. A few administrative tasks while we wait for the top of the hour to come around. I do have everyone muted so that you can hear me clearly. There's no background noise from any of our watchers. But you do have the ability to submit questions, comments during this webinar. In your GoToWebinar control panel, you should see a questions section where you can type in. Let's just do a quick check to make sure that everyone can hear my audio okay, and then we can go ahead and get started. Excellent. So I do have the questions open on a separate screen. So if you do have any questions, it might take me a second just to continuously check over there and look at them. But I'll try to get to them if it's relevant to the topic we're currently covering, or I'll spend some time at the end as well just to cover anything that might not be as related. So we are at the top of the hour here, so we will dive into things. We did have 2 releases to Onshape in the month of August, so there is a lot for us to cover here. I think the first place to start is really how to be aware of Onshape's updates and where to see all the new features. You will have an in-app notification whenever we do push a new release that'll pop up the next time you sign in, just letting you know that new updates have been made and you can check out the new features that were added. But if you also go to the question mark icon in the top right, there is a nice what's new section there that'll send you to the latest forum post. And if we go to the new and Onshape section as a whole, we can see that on August 1st and on August 20th, we push releases to the product. So we will be covering everything that we pushed out during both of those releases. To start with, I have kind of an order that I built out, so it's not necessarily going to be in order of those posts, but I have a pretty good order of just some administrative stuff, and then CAD features, drawing features, getting more into the professional enterprise features towards the end. And then one of the big ones I do want to spend some time on as well is the feature script reference parameters topic, which is pretty exciting from our end. So for starters, some of the new improvements we had did in terms of just getting around Onshape, learning Onshape, were to our help section and our learning center. So if we first go over to the learning center of Onshape, we did make some significant UI improvements here. First of all, the main homepage of our learning center has been upgraded, has been improved. Let me zoom out a little bit there. Perfect. To cover different topics and sections and really bring together very similarly related items. So first off is going to be the learning pathways that we've introduced. So if we go to the self-paced learning course, we've started to combine some of these sections and videos into learning pathways. There are 3 main ones right now: the fundamentals to CAD, data management, and Onshape configuration. So these consist of a series of our self-paced training courses where you can go through, see what you've completed so far, choose to continue on to sections, or skip around to what you wanted just to make it easier to navigate about the Learning Center. And then we did add some new videos and some new information to the instructor-led training courses. So they're just nice intro videos of what's going on in the environment, some more information on what's to be covered and who the instructors are. So you can find that information here as well. The other thing that we've also improved upon is the UI and interface for the help section in Onshape. I think this is always underutilized. I reference it probably a few times a day just as refreshers or to help point people in the right direction. So whenever you're in a feature in Onshape or just have questions on something specifically, there's always a nice little question mark icon next to that feature that'll send you right to the help index topic. Or just to get to the top level of Onshape's help, you can go to the question mark icon in your little help menu when you're within the environment and go right there right away. So we've started to separate out major topics for our environment, things covered for enterprise specific, modeling in general, release management, and then again, quick access links to our learning center, webinar, and video libraries. So if you ever want to get started in Onshape, want to learn something new, I think this is actually a great home base to get started, because then all the resources that you would want to or could reference are available for quick access right here just from the main home page. And we'll see just an improved UI. We have specific sections broken out now for Android, iOS, the native applications for our mobile devices, and then also just easier navigation for each of the main topics around Onshape in general. Now, getting more into the CAD environment itself, I'm going to start off just by going through some new CAD feature improvements. Some of the big ones will be just working in the parts studio space here. So right now I have this main body to a landing gear component, and we now have the ability to actually reorder multiple features. In the past, when working with a large feature list, if I wanted to reorder features just to organize them together better, or maybe I have a sketch that's then being referenced in another feature several features down, and I just want to get them closer together, we could only do so one at a time to click and drag them through our feature list. Now with Onshape, I can actually select multiple features in the feature list. I'm just left clicking. Again, we have persistent selection, so you don't need to control click here. But of course, you can always shift select to get a full range of the features as well. But I just want to move these two make connectors together and at the very bottom of my feature tree now. So I can select them even though they're in different locations, and then click and drag down. And we'll notice I have an indicator that I have 2 items selected. And as I drag them to the bottom and release, both get moved down to the bottom together. I find that to be very powerful just to help reorganize your designs, especially if you're just cleaning things up or wanting to make things more easy to reference from a design intent standpoint. Along with these make connectors that I've reordered, we can also now reference make connectors for a lot of things in the design side. So we tend to think of make connectors as very useful in the assembly side of things. You'll notice in Onshape, right, there are no planes in the assembly. So we've now opened up the functionality for make connectors in the part design side of things, where we can reference them both for sketching. So I can actually use this as a sketch plane now, where I can select it, hit Shift S to start a new sketch command, and I now have a sketch plane in line with that make connector point. And let's just say I want to draw some sort of profile, maybe to revolve. Now, if I want to revolve this profile I just created, we can also use a make connector as our axis for revolution. So we've added 2 new pieces of functionality for utilizing make connectors. One, they can be referenced for sketch planes, and they can also be referenced as a revolve axis on top of just any cylindrical face, or of course a sketch line or edge that can be used as that revolve axis as well. Now if I go back into this sketch really quick, and we just do a quick dimension of this, and let's make this, let's say 15 millimeters. This is a pretty small relative sketch component, and maybe I did want to add a sketch fillet to these edges. In the past, we could always click and drag to place a sketch fillet, but it wasn't always discoverable. We do have a default sketch fillet value, so if I just simply click on one of these vertices, it's actually not going to work because this is a little too small for me. Let me actually get out of here and reset that to make sure I'm getting this correct. So make this 15 millimeters. Let's try to add a sketch fillet to this. Of course, it's remembering my last action. But in the past, the default value might be too large for any sketch entities you're trying to fillet. Now in Onshape, and let me just make another smaller rectangle here. Got that value. There we go. Let's try this guy. Now with Onshape, we do show a quick preview of where the current sketch fillet radius lies. So it's instead of just completely failing out or not giving me any feedback, I do see the existing sketch fillet radius as it's being applied, and then can choose to drag it to a correct positioning where I now see blue lines telling me that's actually going to work and will be accepted. And then I can left click to accept it, or I could have always just double clicked on the radius value, started typing it in, or after I do the left click, I can type in a more appropriate value. So let's do this a clean 0.04 inches. Excellent. And then I can then use that same radius to apply across the board. And we should be good to go, at least on these two corners as we saw. Now, in terms of just designing, there are a few other things to cover. As I'm working on parts and pieces, I may have instances where they're super large or they're very small and finely detailed. And we do, start to tessellate the images as we zoom in and out of them. You can start to see some flatter edges as we go along. In the past, we've always had the ability to actually edit the appearance of a part and force a tessellation quality onto it. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this to give me a good example in this use case, but if we jump over to, say, the assembly of this part, we now allow for the auto increase in the tessellation quality. There is still an upper limit, so we don't progressively increase the tessellation. We automatically increase the tessellation of the parts in the assembly and the part studio over time until they get to the highest quality or the highest quality that's allowed. So in the past, you would have to choose to right-click, edit the appearance of a part, and force it to be that finer quality. Now, as we're looking at something over time, it will progressively get better. So just saving you a few clicks if you need to zoom in, look at certain details. One thing to note with the auto tessellation increase is this is view specific. So if I stayed really zoomed out on a part, it won't increase the tessellation over time because this far away it looks good. As I zoom in on specific components, just this specific view that I see on my screen will increase in that tessellation quality. Nothing else off my view will actually increase. So if I zoom out and come over to the other side of my components, this area would still have a lower tessellation quality until we automatically start to refine it. In terms of just increases in overall performance as well, when we start to get into sheet metal parts, we did push an improvement to also improve sheet metal performance. Now, a lot of people will tend to go and just try creating a simple sheet metal part just to test it out. And we can do that really quickly here as well. So let's extrude out some sort of rectangle. Let's convert it to a sheet metal part. Let's say we're going to remove one of these faces, bend a few edges. That looks pretty good. And we can look at our regen time, which has always been there, just letting me know how long it's taking the Parasolid kernel and the Onshape environment to render and spin up this feature in terms of our regeneration time. Now, as you get more complex and more detailed with your sheet metal, and even when you get into multi-part sheet metals, we are starting to see significant improvements in the performance from what was previously seen. So, a lot of people would have some performance hits with sheet metal with holes in it or multiple sheet metal components being designed together. We've improved our performance in that respect. So you won't necessarily see it as significantly on a simplified model like this, but as you get some more complex sheet metal components, larger, more production level products, then you'll start to see some improvements from what you usually saw in the past. As we're working on designs and products, we'll of course want to get other people involved. Onshape is a collaborative tool, but everyone would always get a notification, whether it's through an email or through the mobile application, for comments, shares, things of that nature. We have opened up and expanded each user's preferences. So you can now go to your account, go to the notifications section, and very specifically choose when you're going to get an email notification and a mobile notification for things like documents shared directly with you, mentions of you in comments within Onshape, or documents that you've marked to be notified on. We do have a minimum threshold, so even though I can select nothing, you would still be given an email notification for more admin level things, more specific things, if a document was shared with you, things of that nature. And there are a few questions that came up. I just want to take a second to take a look at those. Yeah, so these are some pretty good questions here. In other CAD systems, we're using some of the same parts in every project, and we have a separate folder. So can we set something up like that with an Onshape, such as a template? Absolutely. If I actually go back to my home page of this account, we can see that I have a few folders generated. So at Onshape, you can create folders, nesting folders. We do have the ability to share top-level folders by right-clicking on them and sharing them with a group. We have this concept of linking parts into other documents, other locations where you can control, what version, what point in time of that part's being used. And you have the power to go and actually update those reference materials instead of them just automatically updating on you if someone decides to make an edit to it. So we do have a lot of powerful tools around reusing of parts and creating, say, a project style folder for common components, standard components as you go forward. If you are looking for standard components like fasteners, nuts, bolts, washers, those sorts of things, I would definitely take a look at our insert dialog and our assemblies, because we do have a standard content section where we're continually adding to that. In both of the previous two releases, I believe, we did add more details, more material to the standard components listings here. There is a forum post that you can go to request any standard parts that you might not see or might want. In this post, we actually also list what's newly been added. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, we're in May, we can see Jason. He's heading up doing most of the standard content in our assembly view there. He's starting to show lists of the ANSI ISO screws that we added back in May. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom here, I believe it was August 20th, where we pushed a few PEM parts to be added in the environment as well. So whether you need just standard fasteners, nuts, bolts, we have that for you. But if you do want to create your own standard parts for, say, sub-assemblies, supplier models, you can do that very easily with an Onshape. So sketch fillets, notifications, the Learning Center. We are going through this pretty quickly. Does anyone have any questions on anything that I've covered so far or want to go into more detail on them? Just shoot a note in the question section. I'd be more than happy to drill down into these more specifically. But I also want to make sure that we get through everything that we have here listed. If we do go to the top level assembly of this model, we'll notice that a few of these parts have been designed in context. So if we look at my instance tree on the left here, we'll see a bunch of arrows next to parts that were used as in context references. So those are the solid arrows. And then other parts that were affected by the in context work. So not necessarily the exact reference point, but were part of that, maybe influenced by from a design intent perspective. So if I look at this drive shaft, this main drive shaft here, this was used as an in-context reference. And in the past, we did have some different context menu information available. We did choose to update and reorganize this to make it a little bit more straightforward. What we ended up finding was, since Onshape does have a very flexible use for making multiple in-context references to the same assembly, that a lot of people were making almost too many unnecessarily, instead of maybe wanting to go and update or edit an existing in-context edit. So we decided to change the menu just a little bit to make it more referenceable, more easier to understand. So in the past, we actually listed each of the context references in a row here. And then next to the dropdown, you'd see the options to either edit them, update the context, or right below at the bottom would be to create a new one. Now we give you the option of, you make the choice. Okay, I want to go and edit the context that I already have of the drive shaft main. So I can go and click on that. It'll send me to the Parts Studio and show the view of that in context reference. So I see the ghosted view of my assembly with that main drive shaft as a solid part that I was affecting and working on in the space. And when you are in a Parts Studio with an in context active, this new menu item also gives the option to rename and update the context. So that used to be in another location or tied specifically to a specific value or a specific feature. Now it's all included right in the menu here, easy to access. Again, just simplifying this process, making it a little more discoverable for people to be able to take advantage of and use those workflows properly. If we do make a shift over to drawings, we've also made some significant updates on the drawing side of things as well. I think one of the big ones is just the coalescence of our user interface as a whole. If I go back to one of my part studios really quick, let's go back to this main body. We'll notice we're starting to have some similarities in terms of the layout of the user interface. Again, just for discoverability, ease of navigation for our users. So we have the feature list on the left, and then on the right, you'll see things like our configuration panels, and if sheet metal models are created there, the ability to see the sheet metal flat pattern and the bend and rip table as well. So we're starting to mimic that in the drawing view as well. So on the left side here, we're going to see all of our sheet control. And when we drop those down, expand those out, we'll see each of the views and the references used for each of these drawing views. So I have multiple sheets to this drawing. I have an exploded view as my first sheet, then the main body detail drawing as my second sheet. And I can then see all of the views I have in this drawing and all of the references used for the data that I'm pulling in terms of dimensions or callouts on each of these views here. On the right side, we have our drawings properties menu. This used to be up in the top left toolbar of our drawings, but now we moved over to the top right again just to bring everything together from a user interface perspective. So you get used to just looking to either side for those main controls as we go forward. And one of the newest things we've added to drawing properties is our tables control. So as of August, this was already existing. This is drawing properties tab, where you could see everything but the drawing tables. But here's where you can change different colors for each of the different instances or annotations, the text size or fonts. And now we've introduced table control for things like the line thickness in the BOM table or any manually inputted tables as well. When we are working in drawings, we always had a hotkey, at least in the modeling space, of Shift N to quickly go and rename things. So if I come in here and add a new drawing sheet, I can now just quickly press Shift N when I have my drawing sheet view selected, and then I can start typing into it right away. So maybe this is main drive shaft, if I can spell today. And the same thing for the drawings tabs at the bottom. So as I have a tab selected, I can come over here, make a selection view, and I'm good to go for just that quick, instead of having to right click and select rename. That Shift N option will bring up those details so you can start typing and not have to use your mouse as much, just for some productivity increases. We are working with pieces of sheet metal and doing things like grabbing drawings of the flat pattern. So we'll see here again, just that interface on the right, we can see our flat pattern. I can choose to right click on it and then create a drawing of the flat pattern of this component. I'll do no views, just insert it in. Get a nice scale to it. I'll right click and update this. Yeah, 1 to 1 should work just fine for us here, or 1 to 2, I guess. Now, when I right click and export out this drawing, and let's do as a DXFDWG, maybe I'm sending this off to my supplier or sending this off to a manufacturer. We have added some new options on the export of drawings. One of them is going to be using splines instead of polylines on the import. So this will be very important for laser engraving or just laser cutting in general, to make sure you get those nice smooth lines instead of those small, multiple straight lines connecting to make up that curve. And then if we are just exporting out a flat pattern in general, so if I right click and say export a flat pattern, I also have the option to exclude bend tangent lines and bend center lines. So I can choose to include them or exclude them depending on if my CAM system, my laser cutting system, reads those a certain way, I can choose to keep them in there or leave them out just so they don't interfere with my other manufacturing program. In terms of CAD features just from Onshape in general, that was pretty much it from our What's New updates in the month of August. For the second half of this webinar, I'm going to be focusing more on the professional and enterprise features. A lot of them are around the release workflow process and how admins can help get things a little bit more set up. So for starters, what I want to talk about in terms of a professional license of Onshape, we have this concept of a company. So you can have a company that owns, say, the billing for Onshape. So it's not just one individual user paying for each of their accounts. And companies can, hold on to the data as a whole instead of just an individual Onshape user. We've now started to bring that over into the App Store. So in the past, when you want to subscribe to certain applications, any application in general, you would have to pay for it on an individual basis. Now for companies using Onshape in the professional setting, you can actually pay for multiple licenses at once and choose who gets to use them. This actually also works even for the free apps to subscribe to. One of my favorite ones that has been added is called the Link app. This was developed by one of my colleagues, Lou Gallo. This allows you to link other websites, Google Docs, as another tab in your Onshape document. And so, me as a company owner, I maybe want to have all of my users have access to this and make sure they're set up so they're not worried about it. So in the initial setup stage, you can go to the App Store, start to subscribe to these applications, and choose how many users you want to have for each of these applications. So we'll come in here, type in my password. Looks like it's not going to remember it for me. I subscribe to it. It's just giving me a quick read down of how to use an application in Onshape. You can add an app through the plus sign in the bottom left of a document. But now if I come back to my company settings here, so let's hit the Onshape logo, click on my user, and go to Solon Industries company settings. I can go to the application section and scroll down and now see this link tab added. If I look all the way over to the right, I can see that I actually have 4 seats of this link tab. And when I go into it, and this is for any application, I can see I have 4 users and only 1 person actually utilizing it. So the account I have right now. I can choose to start adding the other users to my account that I want to have access. So, Howard, Bernadette, and Leonard should also probably have access here to join my group. And I can now give them all access and see them in the list. So it's very similar to adding or subtracting users to your company license based on the number of seats you're paying for. But you can now do this for applications. So maybe you're paying for 1 seat of a simulation tool or a rendering tool. You can now choose who is using it and even swap people to and from it. So a nice, very flexible option here moving forward. Staying more from the admin side of things, when we are in a release process in Onshape, so let's say we're working on this main body and this item is ready to be released. I can right click on this, go into the release dialog, and choose a specific approver that I might want to have access to this. Before I do so, let's just go into our sharing settings, make sure the appropriate people have access. So I'm just going to share in, let's do Howard, and I'm not going to give him edit access. So in the past with Onshape, if you wanted to be an approver and add it to the approver list, you would need explicit edit access to the document. We understand in a real company environment, project managers, owners might not necessarily have access to all of the CAD data in terms of editing it, but they still need to view it, approve of it as it comes across their desk. So when we do go through the release process, I can come in here and add that Howard user, and he can still choose to approve this, and we'll call this, revision A, and submit this for approval. And then Howard will get a notification. Even though he doesn't have that edit access, he can still come in, view the document, make comments, either accept or reject my request for approval, and we can continue to move forward. For those of you that are new to Onshape, looking at this for the first time, even though I have a current pending release, I can still actively edit and modify the part that's being pending. Because of how our timeline works and how we track data, that previous point in time is still locked down. So this point is still uneditable as it's pending. When it gets released, it can no longer be edited as well. But I can still continue on and work on the next iteration, even as I'm waiting for that approval to come through. So you're not being slowed down just for an administrative task of a release being approved. You can have other designers, other users also working on that as you're just waiting for that approval to go through. So let me actually log in as Howard really quick. I'm just going to log in through a private browser session. And let's go and actually accept that. So go to my Howard user. Under my notifications, I will see the ability to view that release. Even though I do not have write permission, I can still go and actually approve of this. And if we switch back over to Sheldon, we can see that this has now been officially approved. With releases and the approval process in Onshape, in the past, the release history wasn't always necessarily straightforward. So now when we come in here and look at a release package, oops, nope, wrong spot. If we look at the release history of a specific part, the revision history of a specific part, we do have some more referenceable information giving you a lot of details as we go forward. So let's actually just quickly go and release this one more time so we can see what an obsolete looks like and take a look at that revision history as well. So I'll just make myself the approver because I have that ability turned on. You can, of course, always prevent the creator or provide a list of specific people that can allow for the approval process to go through. With this demo account, just to make things easier, I do like to open myself up just to do this very quickly. If you release, submit it. And let's choose to obsolete this as well. So just showing off some of the workflows to our release process. Great. So this main body has gone through a cycle of being released a second time, and that first release being, obsoleted so that no one would mistakenly use it for a full production run. So if I go and look at the revision history of this part, I am very clearly being notified that revision A, that release 1, is obsolete, and then I should be using revision B or that release 2. And so I can choose to actually drill down and view the obsolescence as a whole, see what that package looked like, see who did it, see if there's any notes or any specific information on why that occurred. In the past, this wasn't always available as forward as this is. So now we're just giving you easy access to this visible information, again, from a project manager perspective or for anyone who's interested in what's going on in the progression of a design. Now that this part's been officially released, let's say I do want to use this again in another location, another document. So let's just call this our new design. In this case, I'm just going to start piecing together an assembly as we go forward. So I'll start to insert a bunch of things. I'll come into my other documents, look for that specific main body part, and actually insert it in. So this is how we bring in a reference part. But this is referencing the latest point in time. In the past with Onshape, we could have always, we always had the ability to actually switch to a specific version that we're referencing. Now with Onshape, we can also choose to specifically reference a revision. Now there is a very important difference here as we move forward. So in the conceptualization phase of a design, you might be making multiple versions as you go forward. If you are making versions, this link will show blue saying that there's a new version available, and that could get in the way or just be a little noisy, especially if you only care about referencing the specific revision. So now that I'm referencing just a revision in Onshape, I will only be bugged in this document, in this design, if a new revision is ever officially released and approved by the appropriate approvers. So there can be 100 versions that are created to this main body and its originating document, but it won't be bugging you in this new design document until a new version is officially released as like revision B or revision 2. Are there any specific questions on that? Excellent. No, I think that was it for the professional updates. Oh, there was one more here. So the last bit for the professional tier in Onshape is the ability to create teams for companies. So with any account Onshape, you could always create a team of people on your own. Now companies, so I'm under my Solid industry company settings, companies can actually create teams and hold on to and control those teams of people. So the company admins can control that instead of you having to specifically set it. So now we have teams in two spots, one at the company level, and then me as an individual user, I of course can create my own custom teams, maybe for help or assistance on something, or just some information on what's going on there. Now, moving forward, I don't necessarily have a full enterprise account I can sign into right now. There's only a few things that we've updated of note to enterprise from what I'd like to talk about today. First, under the enterprise tier. So, as everyone knows, Onshape does have an open API. So, we can have developers come in here, create custom applications. That's what they use for creating and connecting apps in the App Store to the Onshape environment as a whole. Under the enterprise setting, we always care about keeping things private, having their own little environment to get your job done and not have any interference from, say, the outside world. And you can invite people into that enterprise environment and make sure your data is always secure. We now have the ability to where an app developer can specify that the app is only used by their company's enterprise. So if you have any internal processes that you're trying to automate or customize by creating a custom app within Onshape, you can guarantee and make sure that only your enterprise is using it. On top of that as well, we do still want to allow for data to be transferred outside of the enterprise. You might be working with suppliers, manufacturers that are outside of the Onshape enterprise environment, but they still need to get your CAD data to make the products and parts that you're designing. So as an admin, and I'll just show it off for my professional account as well, you do have the ability to actually transfer data. So it's going to be under the right-click menu. When I'm at a document, I can right-click on it, and there will be an option to transfer data. There are a few very specific points here because we want to make sure that there's a lot of control to this. In the professional setting, if I want to transfer something, I simply add a user and choose to make them the owner. Under the enterprising tier, if I right-click and choose to transfer to somebody, the transfer is pending, and I always have the ability to take it back and to cancel that transfer of ownership until the recipient actually physically goes and approves that transfer. So they'll get a notification saying, hey, there's a transfer pending of this document to your account. Do you want to accept it or reject it? At any time before that gets accepted, the person that initiated that transfer can actually go call it back and keep it within their environment. So some nice safeguards there, some nice control, but still giving that ability that's been asked for and that's been needed. Last but not least, what I really want to get to here is talking about feature script and the ability to have reference parameters. Quick overview of feature script. With Onshape, since we are browser-based, we had to create all of the CAD features used in our environment from scratch because no one has done it before. So created our own custom coding language called FeatureScript that we actually built the product on. So the extrude feature, the fillet feature, the chamfer feature, the loft, all of those are created using this coding language called FeatureScript. There's a really awesome community here, especially with our Onshape users, that are creating their own custom tools from this using our standard library, which is open in the public document space of Onshape, where you can see the actual code used for each of those main CAD features you see in your toolbar. You can then take these, rewrite them, add to them, to then go and do these really custom, powerful add-ons that you can then add to your toolbar as well. My favorite's always the spur gear, making a nice mechanically correct gear instead of having to do all the math behind it and get it laid out. But one of the big ones that's been used heavily is our beams feature. So if I come in here to that document I just created, and we go into the Parts Studio. Let's just lay out a quick path, just a quick square frame for my beams to follow along. We'll do like 40 by 55. I can come to the top right of my toolbar and select to use the beams feature to then pick up those edges, and it'll automatically generate profiles for me. Now, this always had a limited number of profile options. Our creator of the beam feature, I believe that was Neil, he's always continuously trying to add as much as he can to it. But of course, people always have crazy needs, wants, or very specific asks on what types of profiles to add. Previously, anybody could have gone in and actually copied this beam feature for themselves. Let's actually come over here and find it. There it is. So I can always open up the public document that's referencing this custom beams feature. And then I could have always copied it and then gone into the actual code itself, changed it, rewritten it to add those specific profiles. But we've now introduced this new capability in FeatureScript to be able to reference certain parameters. So if I go back to my new design, and if you have the beams feature, actually you should update this. You'll notice a little blue link icon, just like a linked document, where you can right click and choose to update this, because we've added a new option here to actually create a custom beam profile. With this reference parameter, this acts just like the derive tool, essentially. So you can open up and search either the current document for other sketch profiles, or search any of the other documents within Onshape. So we do have a public document of 80/20 profiles. These are just sketches done from the top plane about the origin point. And now I can specify, a specific 80/20 profile used instead of just, the limited set of standard options in the beam tool as a whole. It's giving you a lot more functionality, a lot more flexibility for a lot of the existing custom features we have within Onshape. But then as a FeatureScript developer, this can also be extremely powerful. So if you're working with a company or creating something on your own, maybe let's say you're using CSV data to reference for a custom profile of, say, an airplane wing or a turbine blade. In the past, you could only actually import these one at a time, making the custom features really single use. So I would choose to come in here, import a file, and I can only do that one at a time as we go forward. We'll come in here, see this import path. It's very static, very limited just to this one part studio that I'm using. Now with an Onshape, if I come in here, create a new feature, I will see the options under our feature parameters to either have a part studio reference parameter, an image reference parameter, or a CSV reference parameter. There's a lot that can be done with this. There's a lot of detail behind this. I do want to draw your attention back to that What's New post from August 20th, because this provides a lot of useful links, a lot of useful points to drill down more into this information as we go forward. So if we go down to the bottom here, we have a specific reference parameters example document, and we've added to our feature script documentation for exactly how to use these tools. So reference parameters examples is a public document. You can search for it. You can look for the link for it in the forum post. This provides a lot of different options going through basically what I just talked about, but in very specific detail for specific use cases here. So let's take a look at a few of these. And I'll close out a few of my browser tabs as we go along. So this is just providing some information on links you can reference to get more information on how to use the feature script. And then we have 3 folders, one showing a few CSV examples, one showing a few image examples, and one showing a few Parts Studio examples. So in this case, with the CSV example, what it's showing off is just what we talked about in terms of when you're writing the code. We have 2 separate CSV files that can be utilized here. In the past, you would probably have to create 2 separate features using that import function to actually reference each of these independently. Again, it's just a static selection choice. With this create 2D spline option, you can actually physically go in and choose which of the files you're pointing to and grab that data. And so you're using the same feature if you want across the board here, which is pretty nice. Because of this customization, because of this referenceability, we can also, and I didn't submit my feature change, so let's come back in here, get that profile selected that I wanted. That works great. That looks good. Because of the way this works, we can actually also utilize this in things like our configurations as we're going forward. So if I'm configuring a Part Studio, let's just add a few configurations here. So let's just do like 1 and 2. I can actually configure that custom feature and the selection being made for those different profiles. So this is expanding, opening up a lot of possibilities where you can get really creative with how to take advantage of this. I was hoping and planning to stop at about 10 of. I know we have about 4 minutes left. So I want to take the rest of this time just to see if there's any further questions, because this really concludes what we've created and released in the month of August. We do have some exciting new releases coming up very, very soon for those that have been paying attention to our timeline of releases. So just sit tight for what's going on there. But I would like to open up the last few minutes here just for a Q&A for anything that we've recently pushed out. Excellent. And just as a note for anyone that's new to Onshape, you're seeing this for the first time, take a look at it in depth. Definitely go into the help index, reach out to us. We are very responsive. We do want to make sure you have a good experience just testing out the waters and seeing how you like the program. We do have trials for things like the professional version. We of course have the free account, so you can just sign up, get going right away, no questions asked. But it's a very powerful tool. We do a lot and we work really hard to make sure we're constantly pushing updates. And as well, if you do have any suggestions or comments to make on any of the features or functionality, you can either go to the forums and submit an improvement request, or within Onshape itself, go and fill out a feedback ticket under the question mark icon menu, and that'll get you right in touch with our support team. If that's it and no one has any further questions, I think we can sign off for the day. I'll hang on for just 1 more minute to see if there's anyone else that has questions that come up.